RedditHub. We called her Space Girl. Her real name was Megan Daniels, but nobody actually called her that. She'd been Space Girl since grade 2. She was the kind of kid who stuck out in the crowd with her long red hair, ghostly pale skin and Coke bottle glasses. For as long as I'd known her, Space Girl had been quiet. She didn't like to be around us. She didn't play with us when we were kids, she didn't even talk much. Most of the time, she'd find somewhere to sit far away from everyone else. Then she'd open up her little notebook and scribble inside of it. Sometimes she wrote poems, sometimes she drew. But she was always off on her own little world. Nowadays, I understand why we targeted her. She was different, and she was alone. That doesn't justify any of it, but kids can be cruel. I remember that it was Sasha Brown who told me that Space Girl was retarded because her mother was on drugs. She probably just made that up. But we all believed it. She had always been the worst towards Space Girl, and she kept that up until the end. It all started in grade 5 when Sasha took her notebook. It had been raining that day, so we'd had an indoor recess. Space Girl sat in the corner at her desk, eyes focused on her notebook as she methodically worked on a drawing. Sasha and I had been sitting nearby at our desks, and we simply just watched her do her thing. "I can't believe they let that retard sit in with us." Sasha murmured, "Look at her. Why do they even let them in schools? They aren't gonna learn anything. Better than leaving her at home with her crackhead mom," said Tanya Everett. She and I weren't exactly friends, but she sat close to Sasha and I. "My dad says he sees a different car in front of her house every day. He says that she lets boys come and they pay her so they can have sex." None of us could actually say the dreaded S word at the time. Sex was still a terrible unknown thing, and we all had been raised to believe that nobody decent would ever do it. Space Girl paused, and her eyes darted away from her book to look at us. I can only imagine she'd heard us. Sasha just stared right back at her. "What? Do you have a problem, Space Girl?" she asked. The teacher was out of earshot, and that gave her carte blanche to say whatever she wanted. Space Girl didn't respond. She just looked back down at her notebook, but Sasha had been challenged, or at least she thought she'd been. She looked over to the teacher's desk to make sure she was busy, then she got up and moved closer to Space Girl. "What are you even doing in there, retard?" She'd reached out to snatch the book before Space Girl could stop her. "What even is this? A unicorn? What are you, 5?" She handed the book to me, and I took it on instinct. There was a brightly colored drawing of a unicorn inside. The artwork was actually pretty nice, but I would never have said so. The book was passed on to Tanya next, and Space Girl could only look at us helplessly. "Wow, you can't even draw. Look at this?" She tore the page out of the notebook, and Space Girl let out a startled whimper, as if she'd been struck. The picture was crumpled up and the book was thrown on the floor by Space Girl's desk. "Draw something that isn't trash next time," Tanya said, and Sasha just giggled as if it was anything other than being mean-spirited just for the sake of it. Space Girl slowly picked her book up off the floor, avoiding eye contact as Tanya and Sasha turned away from her. I continued to stare. I remember that the way she moved was so defeated, as if she were shrinking in on herself. She looked up at me, but only for a moment, and I felt bad for her. I really did. But I didn't do anything about it. I just left her to rejoin the others. After that, Space Girl became an easy target for Sasha and Tanya. Every chance they got, they'd harass her, and I regret to admit that I was usually right there with them. During the days where we could go outside for recess, Space Girl would always sit beneath the same tree, always working in her notebook. When she did, we would always lean on the trunk and look down over Space Girl's shoulder. "Wow, that's really good, Space Girl," was how most of her comments would start. "Did you mean to draw it like it got hit by a truck, or is that just your style?" There was never a compliment. She would always find something to needle. "Can you draw me?" Sasha asked once. "I heard that retards were always like art geniuses or something. Maybe it'll even look like a person." Space Girl didn't look up at her. She seemed to be trying not to acknowledge the insults. I won't pretend like I was blameless either. I never stopped them, and there were plenty of times where I was right there, making fun of her because that was what we did, and we weren't the only ones. More or less everyone hurt her in some way or another. But she never complained. I think she was too scared to. It was late December in 7th grade where things got even worse. I don't know all the details, and I don't know just for how long things had been boiling over, but I'd heard a rumor that James Hardy headed out for Space Girl. James had only been in my class a few times, and he wasn't in my class that year. He was a small, mousy-looking kid who was convinced he was the world's toughest gangster. The rumors said that someone had seen his dad going into Space Girl's house. Naturally, there had been speculation that they'd been having sex. Someone told me that James's parents had been divorcing because of it. Somehow all of these rumors had mutated into claims that James and Space Girl were dating, and first think that was what had rubbed him the wrong way. We were coming in from recess when some boys decided to pull a little prank on James. The whole prank had been set up by Brian Jordan and his brother Mike. They had some mistletoe for the holiday season, and had set it up in the hall leading back to our classroom. Mike had grabbed Space Girl during recess and were holding her behind the door where the mistletoe was. When James walked through, they pushed her at him and snapped a picture. I'd been just behind James when it happened. I watched as Space Girl came flying out of seemingly nowhere, eyes wide and afraid, then slammed into James. They both hit the ground, and I could hear the other boys laughing. "Look, she wanted to give you a kiss," one of the boys said. Space Girl was trying to crawl away from James and pick up her notebook, but somebody had kicked it out of sight. I remember that she looked back towards James, and there were tears in her eyes. She must have been terrified with everything that was going on. She clearly hadn't wanted any part in this, but there she was at the center of it. "You f***s," James yelled as he picked himself up. "Hey, she just wanted to give you a smooch," offed Brian. "Come on, give her a kiss." Someone pushed Space Girl towards James, and he glared at her as if all of this was her fault. She tried to stand and run, but he was angry and he wasn't thinking straight. I watched as he grabbed her and hit her. A square punch to the jaw. Then he tossed her to the ground and went after Brian next. A teacher had to get in to pull James off of him. He, Space Girl and the Jordan brothers ended up getting suspended right before the Christmas holidays. We didn't see Space Girl until January. We didn't see James or his friends ever again. On Christmas Eve, there was a car accident on the highway outside of my town. Supposedly it had swerved off the road to avoid an animal of some kind, and gone into a ditch. Mike, Brian and their parents didn't survive. On December 27th, James was killed while outside shoveling his driveway. My parents told me that he'd been attacked by an animal. Probably a deer or something. But that seemed so unusual. I'd never heard anything about deer attacking people before. Especially not in my area. I went over to Sasha's house on the day before New Year's. We'd both gotten some gift cards for Christmas and we were planning to walk to the mall together to use them. Her parents weren't home, they both had to work. So it was just us when I got there. "Hey," kept me waiting, she said when I knocked on the door. "Sorry. It's fine. I'll be ready in a bit. Come on upstairs, I wanna show you something." I didn't question what it was. I figured it was just something else she'd gotten for Christmas, so I went upstairs with her. "You're gonna love it," she promised me. "It's gonna be so funny." She led me to her bedroom, and as soon as she opened the door, I spotted a familiar notebook on her desk. "Where did you get this?" I asked, walking closer to it. "Space Girl dropped it when Brian and his brother pulled that prank the other day. She dropped it. I may have grabbed it. You know, just for safekeeping." She cracked a wry grin before opening the notebook. "Look at this. She's been drawing the same damn unicorns forever. She didn't even finish this one." She paused at one small picture that was labeled The Unicorn Prince. It depicted an empty field with a blank space where the titular prince should have been. Sasha flipped through the pages a little more until she got to the newer ones. I figured since they kicked Space Girl out for a little while, and her mom is too poor to get her anything for the holidays, I'd step up. "What do you think?" Sasha wasn't anywhere near as good of an artist as Space Girl was, but the simple detail in what she had drawn turned my stomach. In her first picture, Space Girl was hanging from a rope. Her tongue was hanging out, and her eyes were closed. In the second one, Space Girl had a gun in her mouth. In the third one, she was standing on the edge of a building. Sasha giggled as I flipped through her crude depictions of suicide. There were pages of them. "What do you think?" she asked with a grin. "I'll bet she'll lose her shit." I closed the notebook and looked over at Sasha. "Are you out of your mind?" I asked. Sasha's grin faded. "What do you mean? You stole her notebook just so you could draw these?" "Sasha, that's really messed up. It's Space Girl. Who the hell cares about Space Girl, Jane? You just drew her killing herself over and over again. I took the book off her desk. Do you not understand what's wrong with that?" Sasha just stared at me like I was crazy. "Fine. Sue me for trying to be funny." Sasha said, "Just give it here." She outstretched a hand to take the notebook, but I pulled back from her. "No. You're just going to put something else in there." Anger flared in Sasha's eyes. "Jane, just give me the book." "No." I opened the book, and I started to tear out those pages of Space Girl's suicide. Sasha lunged for me, trying to grab at the book and stop me, but pushed her back. I didn't mean to push so hard, but I did, and she fell, landing hard on the ground. For a moment, Sasha looked up at me, wide-eyed and shocked. I don't think anyone had laid a hand on her like that before. Then I saw something in her eyes. Not just anger. Something worse. It was the same thing that had prompted her to draw those horrible pictures of Space Girl. I turned and I ran, bolting down her stairs and out her front door, back into the snow. I clutched Space Girl's notebook to my chest the entire time, and I didn't let it go until I got home. Thanks for watching. Did you like the video? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time. R/Bye.